Thank you for joining me for the second video on my sailing research fieldwork trip around the English Channel for my PhD research into the maritime knowledge required for the Norman invasion of England in 1066. I apologise that yesterday's video was actually uploaded today because of the delay, because we had to rejig the schedule for our passage plan, and because of the requirements of the border control that you have to notify your date and time of exit and date of time of re-entry. We had to make sure that that was absolutely correct, so we were somewhat delayed setting off. It was about 40 minutes, so we planned to leave at 10 p.m. last night due to the tides to get into Ouistreham, so that's when we'd all arranged to meet in Gosport. But because of that redoing of the schedule, we actually left at about 20 to 11 last night. It was a 17-hour crossing, and I was going to show you a picture of me here today, well, a video of me today in this beautiful place. I'm in the port at Ouistreham, Port de Plaisance, and it's a beautiful sunny day. But I haven't really slept, so you probably don't want to see what I look like right now. So before we get onto the main part of this video, which is about the crossing of the English Channel last night and for most of today, I'll just give you a brief overview of my PhD research, what I'm trying to achieve in this fieldwork trip that I'm undertaking at the moment, so you have a little bit of background to why I'm doing this and why I think it's interesting. My PhD research seeks to explore the environmental and maritime knowledge that existed in 11th century Normandy. So I want to look at the types of activities that were going on in these maritime environments, like salt working, fishing, whaling, for example. And I also want to have a look at the physical geography and how it's changed. What are the implications of particular 11th and 12th century historians who write about the Norman conquest, naming particular places, because as you'll see on this trip, you'll see the geography of Normandy is quite variable between the lower Normandy coastline, where I am now, and where Ouistreham is situated, and then in the upper Normandy coastline there's a very different geography with chalk cliffs 100 metres high, like the White Cliffs of Dover, but 10 times as long. So I want to explore those environments from the sea, the way that the 11th century historians, who we know made these sea crossings and sea voyages in many cases, how they would have experienced those landscapes, and also, of course, the Norman invasion of 1066 was a channel crossing. So by recreating, well, not recreating, that's certainly not what I'm doing. What I'm trying to do in terms of following the places, the key places in those texts regarding the invasion, is I'm trying to understand those environments and get a better insight into how they were navigated, and what considerations of maritime knowledge would have been required for the Norman invasion of England in 1066. The earliest accounts of the Norman invasion of England from just after the event in the late 11th century were written by people such as William of Jumièges, William of Poitiers, and Guy of Armillon, who had direct connections to people who took part in those events. And it's those authors, supplemented by later 12th century accounts, who do change and adapt the narrative, which is interesting in its own right and something I will be exploring where and why those adaptations occur. But it's those three late 11th century but early authors who discuss the Norman invasion, who give us the sort of route plan that you can see here, where William's fleet started in the estuary of the River Dive in Lower Normandy, and then they were blown, or some people say they went deliberately, along the coast to Saint-Valery-sur-Somme, which is actually outside Normandy in the 11th century in the county of Ponthieu. And from Saint-Valery they crossed to Pevensey in the Hastings area of Sussex in England. So as you can see, my plan for my research fieldwork is to sail around the English Channel following roughly that same journey, but not in terms of recreating it, just to appreciate the coastline, appreciate the considerations of tides, particularly in this area. Many of these ports are inaccessible at certain states of tide, which we will talk about more in later videos. But Dives-sur-Mer is the reason that we left at 10 p.m. last night is because a 17-hour crossing to arrive in Dives, as we'd originally planned, would require us to arrive within 2 hours of high water. So the draft of the depth of our boat, these modern sailing yachts, is quite considerable, and quite considerably more than the 11th century ships that would have been sailed in. But for me to be able to access these coastal locations, it was necessary to time it by the tides. But even in the 11th century, tidal considerations would have been paramount, because if you hadn't timed your tides right, then half of your fleet could be stuck in the estuary and you'd have to wait for the next tide, so you'd split your fleet up. So there are certain considerations that haven't changed at all in the last 1,000 years. So as I mentioned yesterday, we had to readjust our schedule to go to the port of Caen and Ouistreham before we could go on to any other ports in France, because that's the nearest port of entry into France from the UK to the locations I wanted to go to. So as a result, we are in Ouistreham at the moment, because to carry on to Caen has additional considerations, such as they have to raise bridges, and there are timing considerations there. So we've decided to stay in Ouistreham tonight, because it means that there's only one lock to get out tomorrow, so we should be able to get on our way and get back on track sailing along the coast tomorrow morning first thing. So we're going to be back on track going from Caen now along to Fécamp. But we're going to be going along the coast so we can see Dives and the estuary there, also the Seine estuary, which I saw on the way in earlier today, and then around the Cap de la Hève to Étretat, and then Fécamp. So we'll have a lot of interesting scenery and interesting considerations for maritime navigation of this area, because this area is very prone to sandbanks and silting and shifting channels, and as I said, the tides are key here. Fécamp is one of the only natural harbours in Normandy, and that's a really good place for us to go for the modern boat, but also in the 11th century. Fécamp was the location of a ducal palace and also a very important abbey that had extensive fishing rights, salt works, and their monks and abbots had close connections to the ducal family. So I'm looking forward to exploring Fécamp in a bit more detail from their maritime history, because it is extensive, and they still have a herring festival today, for example. Though unfortunately it's not on while I'm here, but it's going to be an exciting place to visit, and all those places along the way that I'll point out will also be interesting to see from the sea, and how we would approach them. And also how you would be able to identify where you were in that seascape. Is another consideration that I'm keen to explore. What sea marks may there have been in the past, or are there today, for navigation of this maritime space. So that's what we're going to be doing tomorrow. But last night we left Gosport to travel across the English Channel to Caen. Now, we actually stopped at Ouistreham, which is the major ferry port on the coast. We haven't continued up to Caen because they have bridges that you need to have raised for you to get through, and we didn't want to risk being delayed getting out tomorrow morning. So we haven't got any photographs from the nighttime sail, because it was very dark and very cold, and the sea was quite rough. It's what we call a moderate sea state, so waves up to 3 meters, and and nighttime crossings, I think it's fair to say, are not my favourite thing to do. So yeah, there weren't any photos, videos, even if I'd wanted to. So the first photo is this one from the sunrise this morning when we were virtually in the centre of the English Channel. I took a video while we were there, just showing you what it looks like when you can't see land in any direction or any other ships at all. So that was just at the sunrise, and I'll let you see that video now. About an hour after sunrise, we were really lucky to see some dolphins that started playing off the bow, and then they started moving all around the ship, so I managed to get some really nice photographs. So I hope you enjoy these. When we approached Ouistreham, we were in the Bay of the Seine, so I could see across to Dives-sur-Mer, where we had planned to go, and also to Le Havre and the Seine estuary, which you can see here. It's the line of cloud. There's a cliff either side, and then the cloud is across the entrance to the estuary. So we made our way into Ouistreham, which, as I've said, is a major ferry terminal, because the wash from the ferries, the big waves that they make, is absolutely horrible. They push you about all over the place. So we were very lucky because one came in not too long after us. But this next video will show you the entrance to Ouistreham from the sea. So the access to Ouistreham is through a lock that we had to call ahead to get through. So we arranged that, and we were in the lock, which maintains the water level in the upper reaches. And then we moved slightly further up the canal to get to Port de Plaisance, which is the port for non-commercial craft and vessels. So we were in there, and that's where I am right now making this video. So here's a marine tracker of the voyage that we made last night and today over I think it's about 112 nautical miles, and we made it in 16 hours, so that's pretty good going. We were going with the tide. We had not very much wind, but yeah, it was a good passage. And here's the plan for tomorrow. Just to reiterate, we're going from Ouistreham along the coast to Fécamp. We're going to see how close we can get to the coast because, as you'll hear from the next video, this coastline in Lower Normandy is very shallow indeed. So we'll be having to follow the 10-metre contour most likely on the map. So we don't run aground, but I'll talk to you more about the tidal constraints of maritime navigation in the English Channel Zone tomorrow. Thank you very much for listening to this second video. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to updating you from Fécamp tomorrow, hopefully, if the internet is good enough. Thank you.